Good afternoon, everyone who's signed up for this most boring workshop that you'll ever attend. Many individuals who work on their resumes or curriculum vitae dread the process. But it is a very necessary process because if you ever want to work and earn a living, it's quite important for you to have a curriculum vitae or a resume in order to showcase your experience. My name is Joe Lahoud. I have done curriculum vitaes and personal guidance regarding experience and resumes, interviewing for work. And my main role here at Khalifa University's College of Medicine is guiding medical students who are interested in certain specialties. So our program here at the Med School is relatively new. We're going to start our second class will start in the next couple of weeks. And it's based on the American model where you go get your undergraduate degree and then move on to apply for medical school, and then you study for 4 years before you go into your residency. My role working with students is based on the fact that medical students have already made the most consequential decision of their lives, going and becoming a physician. The next big decision that they have is what type of specialty they want to go into. My role working with them and guiding them is figuring out what their interests are, their hobbies, their personality types, because these play into what type of specialty they want to go into. Just like when you go into get your undergraduate degree and you start looking for a job, once medical students finish their medical school, they apply for, or before they finish with medical school, they apply for a residency program, just like a job interview, the same process. And we walk with them every step of the way from day one when they enter medical school until they match into a residency program. So we look into a lot of different things, whether they have been doing research, they're doing community service. A lot of that come into play when they're trying to be competitive, because many of our medical students, they have the same qualifications and they go into the same interviews competing with the same individuals who meet those same qualifications. So we've tried to figure out ways to make them more competitive. And so today we're going to work on curriculum vitae, on how you to choose whether it's a resume or a CV, depending on what fits your needs. So the objective will be learn the difference between a CV and a resume, decide which one fits you best. There are they're very different formats, one for the CV and for resume, that allows you to know whether, depending on the job that you're applying for, or the career that you're going into, to decide whether it's a CV or a resume. Now, basically what you can do today, if you're not sure about it, is go ahead and do start with a CV, put all of that information, and then if you need to go and do a resume, then you can reduce that information. We're going to discuss format. Proper and consistent style is extremely important when you're putting together your curriculum vitae. Content, what to include, and templates. At the end, we can either provide you with, I can provide you with my email address to email you a template, or we can send it put it on a link for you to be able to access it. So we will have one for CV and one for resume. So, curriculum vitae or resume, which one would you choose? First, let's start with what is a curriculum vitae. Basically, in the most basic sense, it's a document for you to add all of your experiences, your educational background, your professional background, to a certain extent, interests and hobbies, all in one document that helps you find jobs and do well in interviews, or at least hiring managers can look at your resume and see the qualifications and if you meet the qualifications. So it is a detailed account of one's work experience, professional training, and educational background. Now, what is the difference between a CV and a resume? Mainly, a CV is used in academia. So if you are interested in going into becoming a professor or a researcher, administrative work at a university or a college, or even to a certain extent a school if you want to be a principal, curriculum vitae is the way to go, because it includes every detailed information about your professional experience. Now, for the resume, it's geared more toward jobs in the corporate world or different areas that are not part of academia. I give you an example here with a resume. As you can see, it's very simple. Most resumes have to carry a certain way of format. Over the years, a lot of times things have changed. Resumes go into fashion in a certain way. They recommend doing it that way or this way. It keeps changing, and as someone who's looking to find move jobs or change jobs, will be able to go into and update it based on the recommendations of the time. So resumes are always changing, just so that you can make yourself competitive and more your qualification more appealing. So it has to be a maximum 1 to 2 pages, and it's just a summary. Like a CV, it's a summary of one's professional experience. Moving on to the CV, and you'll see the difference. The resume is 1 to 2 pages. You can add experiences and your skills, languages, education. Some of it is the same as a CV, some of it is not. Here is a curriculum vitae. As you can see, it's 3 pages long. It can be a lot longer depending on how many years of experience you have. As you can see, it starts with education at the top and then goes with the current position. The difference between both is that when you're dealing with a curriculum vitae, education goes in first, always. And the reason why is because it's used in academia. Most positions that you will apply for using in academia or using a CV will require a PhD. So that's the main thing for a hiring manager or a university or institution to look into. First, to see if you have a PhD or a terminal degree that match the qualifications of or the criteria for the position. On the other hand, with a resume, if you're a recent graduate, which I'm assuming a lot of our audience right now are students of KU, or some of them are from the community. If you are a recent graduate, then you can put education first as you are searching for jobs right after college. And then once you gain certain years of experience, and you're ready to move on to a different job or a different company, then you flip it where professional experience goes in first and then education later. And the reason is you want to showcase or highlight the most important accomplishment that you've had. And as a recent graduate, your most accomplished thing that you have done is you went through 4 years of education or however many years of education in order to achieve and earn your degree. Later on, once you use that degree to go into a certain field and start working in that field and gaining that knowledge and experience, and in a lot of cases you're applying that knowledge you learned as a college student into your field, then your value and the highlight would become what have you done in the past, not what have you learned in the past, what experience you've acquired, what knowledge you've acquired based on hands-on experience. That's what you start showcasing the importance of your background professionally and in order to gain employment at the company that you're interested in or in the field that you're interested in. So let's start with format. It has to be organized. Now, organized can be different for different formats, for different setups and layouts, and for different individuals. So if you are an experienced professor, and your focus as a professor, yes, you are a professor and you teach, but you also focus on research. Research takes priority. So you can put that at the beginning, right after your education, on your CV. If you are, and what I mentioned with the resume is also organized, meaning, when you flip education to professional, depending on whether you're a recent graduate or not. Consistent. It has to be very consistent and appealing to the eye. It has to be neat and uncluttered and easy to update. Easy to update is a key point here, because a curriculum vitae and a resume is a live document. You're continuously updating and changing it. And this is why I made that comment at the beginning of one of the most boring things, because people don't like to update their resumes. And because most of the time they do it when they're either looking for a job or they got laid off from a job, and it's a stressful time for them, for people to update it during a time when you're anxious about finding another job, especially if you were laid off. So the best thing to do is make it easy to update, so you can continuously update that information. Anytime you attend a presentation, or anytime you give a presentation, anytime you do some kind of a research or go to a conference, make it a habit of updating either your resume or your CV, based on, for the resume, on the relevant information that will help you gain employment in the future. Now, once you have a format or a template that is easy to update, then updating it regularly should become a second nature. Anytime you attend a conference or an event or do a presentation, it's advised to update it. And the reason why is because you will forget some of the information. And that's why I recommend to all of our students is always make it a habit to update your curriculum vitae. Now the layout, if you don't use a format or a specific format or template that online, or if you end up using our template, you'll find out that the margins are set at 1 inch. Font type, it's recommended to use Arial or Calibri, something that is easier for the eyes to read, and clean and clear and crisp. Font size, for the name at the top, it should be in large font, anywhere between 14 to 18, just to highlight your name and your information, with the phone number and the email address at a smaller font, just so that way it doesn't take away from your name. Now, with the headings, they can be 12 to 14 points, and text can be 10 to 12. And as you can see, the largest font is for the name, and then the headings, and then the text. Moving on to content. When it comes to curriculum vitae, content is anything that you can add on there that would be relevant to your field of expertise. So obviously, name and contact information is always on there, including education and professional or work experience. Now, we can go down the list, and I'm sure if you're an experienced professor or someone who has been in their field for a long time, you can find some missing bullet points that you may have experience in, but most people don't. So if you have that, by all means, add that information to your CV, because like we said, a CV can be unlimited information as long as it's relevant. Honors and awards, if you haven't received any honors or awards, you don't need to add that section. Community service, this is one of the key areas that I recommend to our students, especially those who are not really interested in community service, or they never felt like they want to do community service or do volunteer work. If you're missing that information from your CV, I strongly recommend to find an organization where you can sign up 1 hour a week, 1 hour a month, or once a month, where you can go out there and give back to the community. Why I say that? For several reasons. The main reason, because it feels good to help. You know, being part of your community, helping out your community is something that every human should be doing, helping others. Additionally, for selfish reasons, you can do community service to add it first to your CV, because it'll beef up your qualifications, and makes managers, hiring managers, more interested in you. And the second part, which is a much more important part, is the ability and the potential to network. Many volunteer or NGOs or organizations that offer volunteer work, they host events and they invite their volunteers, their donors, their high-ranking members of the community. And by volunteering and giving back your time to the community, there's a potential of networking and getting to know individuals, high-ranking individuals in your community who are either business owners, business leaders, lawyers, work in government, high officials. It's an opportunity for you to interact with individuals who you can learn from, and equally important, who, if you make a good impression, then you are potentially utilizing these events and getting to know these individuals as informational interviews. They'll get to know you without having conducted any interview. If they like you, if they learn about your background, then there's a potential that you can find employment where they are, if they own their business, or if they are high-ranking members of a corporation. Military experience, obviously, if you've never been in the military, it's something that you don't need, you shouldn't put, because if you don't have that experience, it doesn't go on your CV. Now, if you do have that experience, make sure you put it, because what hiring managers look not only at your qualifications, they look at you as a whole person. What will you contribute to the team? What will you bring to the table? How you will benefit the company as well as the team? And a lot of times, hiring managers look at members who served in the military as extremely disciplined and loyal. And these are qualities that every team, every successful team in an organization should have. So if you have done military service, or if you have military experience, you should do that. You should add it on there and be part of, and have that as part of your conversation during an interview. Foreign language proficiencies. If you are applying for a job in the US, probably don't put English, because it's known that, or it's expected that you speak English. In other countries, I know here in UAE, English is added as one of the languages, because it's if you don't speak the English, it becomes very difficult to communicate. So, starting with contact information, name and contact. Formal name goes on the top. No nicknames. The only time I can think of where you can add a nickname is if your name is extremely difficult if you're an expat, you're working at a country where it's very difficult to pronounce your name, and you end up, changing it to something more simple. So I've seen this in the past. It's a very difficult name where they end up just saying, just call me John. But if your name is Michael or Jonathan or Muhammad, don't put Mo. Just put your full name. Once you get the job and you start getting to know the people in your office, then say, my parents call me Muhammad, but I go by Mo. Everybody calls me Mo. So that's how they start calling you by your nickname. Your nickname does not belong on your curriculum vitae or resume. Now, for email and phone number, always have it on there. Address, I know here in UAE, also in the United States, address is still something common to put on your CV and your resume. And I think it's more of it's something that has been done over the years, over the decades, and is still being used. But if you think about it, it's really not necessary. It used to be done before the advent of email, where HR needs to send you documents to your home address, and it's a good idea to have your home address on there in order to make it easier for them. But these days, everything is done electronically, so it's not necessary to put address. It's still optional, you can, but you really don't have to. Especially on a resume, you need that real estate if it's a one-page document. You don't want to clutter it with home addresses and apartment numbers and zip codes. Next, name and page number in the header. You always add your name, and it automatically adds the page number on a CV. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen resumes where it didn't have the names in the header in the second or third page, or even a personal statement or a cover letter that didn't include a name. Always remember, any document that you send in when you're applying for a position, for a work position, have your name plastered everywhere, because otherwise that information may get lost and then you wonder why you didn't get an interview. Now, next question is, should I add my photo? I personally never put my photo on my resume or my CV. And in the US, it's usually not common. I know in countries around the world, I know here in UAE, a photo is common. However, to me, the only time you should add a photo if it's part of your personal appeal, meaning if you are an actor, if you are a singer, if you're just a performer in general, especially when it comes to art. It's part of who you are. It's part of your presenting yourself. So that I understand adding your photo on your CV. Another reason why to not add your photo, and obviously it's a personal decision. If it's common where you are to add a photo, go ahead and add it. But my take on adding photos is this: when you are being hired, or at least asked to come for an interview, it's your qualifications and the value that you bring to the company is what made the hiring manager contact you and ask you to come for an interview. Now, if you have your picture on there, and let's take, for example, you remind him of or her of someone that they don't like, or someone they've had a bad experience with, I don't know, an ex-wife. That can be problematic for you, because now you have made a negative impression. You may be, it may be a great picture of you, but people are different, and people can look at something in many different ways, and that aren't the same as you look at something, especially when it comes to your photo. So a hiring manager is looking at your qualifications or your resume. Considering research shows that it takes about 11 to 12 seconds for a hiring manager to decide whether to toss your resume or to keep it, having a photo that can impact you negatively is that time frame gets even lower. So my advice is put your qualifications, put your values on your CV, and if you feel the need to have a photo on there, maybe add your LinkedIn page or link to your LinkedIn page, or something that that they can look or search and be able to see your picture. Because at that point, you have already made an impression on the hiring manager that you meet the qualifications and you're someone that they should be interested in. Because once they start looking on LinkedIn, they're looking for what your activities on social media is. And at that point, they can see your picture. But you already made that positive impact, the positive impression on the hiring manager, that your picture is not going to matter at that point, versus if you had your picture on your resume to begin with. So basically, if you feel the need to add your picture, go ahead. but it can be it can affect you negatively when you're applying for a job and getting an interview for that. Next, we move on to education, which is the first thing that you put in as part of your qualifications on a curriculum vitae. Earned degree, from which university, the location, list both undergraduate and graduate degrees with the most recent degree on top. If you are an undergrad, or even if you're going into, if you're in grad school, you can add the degree that you're working to earn, and along with all of that information. And for the date, you put expected in, let's say, December 2020 or May 2021. So you can add that because that can be beneficial for you when you're applying for jobs, especially if it's positions requiring master's degree. Next, professional experience. And like I said, we will find a way to provide you with templates for the either CV and resume, so you can work on that on your own time and add that information and keep that document for yourself so you can continuously update it. So for professional experience, the heading, work experience, professional experience, either one can work. Your title, the company where you work, city and country, date, start date and end date. If it's current, you put the year that you started and just current, or you can have current position on top and then other professional experiences as a separate section. Now, as you move on for responsibilities, you should start each description with a strong action verb. Please do not add your job description as part of your responsibilities. Hiring managers, they are the ones who create job descriptions in human resources. So they know what a job description looks like. And if they see a hint of a copy and paste from a job description, then they'll just toss your resume aside and they won't even consider it. What you ought to do is, even if it's 3 or 4 bullet points, quantity is not as important as quality of the information that you're providing. So always start with strong action verbs like achieved measurable success, and then continue with that information. Add numbers, add percentages, year after year increase of or growth of 15%. That information can provide more detailed information for the hiring manager to know that you actually have been working at that company and have been successful. Other verbs like developed, proposed, implemented, these are all active verbs that you can use to begin your sentence. Then the next section can be other positions and employment. You can list non-academic employment history for those who are working on their curriculum vitae, and you can follow that order of how things should be set up based on the template. Then you can move on to certificate and licensure, professional membership and activities, honors and awards, committee assignments and administrative services. And like I said at the beginning, some of these sections are not necessarily part of your experience. So if they're not part of your experience, don't add them on there, or don't make up things that don't exist. So for certificate and licensure, make sure that you add the title and the certificate and the certifying institution. For professional memberships and activities, so if you're a member of an organization, you can add them in reverse chronological order. And most important, you need to highlight the leadership role or roles that you played within these organizations if you have more than just a member in a professional organization. For honors and awards, this is usually, some of this stuff is also geared for students who are their research students or undergraduate students. So for example, honors and awards, it can be for both for students as well as professionals and professors. You list the award, the sponsor, the city, country, and date of the award. For honors, you can add that as part of your education at the beginning, if you have the honors. If you received honors as part of your education. Committee assignments and administrative services, you can list them in chronological order as well. Educational activities, teaching experience. Again, all of the templates have them in order with the description of what you're supposed to be putting in each section, just to help you figure out if what to put on there and if it's relevant to what you're going to add and what's relevant to the field of work that you will be going into. For teaching experience, this can also be more for students, because if you're a professor who's building his or her CV, you're a professor, you're a teacher. For students, especially graduate students who are mentors to undergraduate students in a certain field, that's the teaching experience that you can add on there on your CV, especially if you're applying for an academic position. That shows that you've done the work, that you've mentored undergraduate students, which is in addition to teaching. Mentorship is a big role that professors take on when as part of their teaching experience. Grants and contract award, the grants and contracts usually go for researchers and among other areas. So if you have done the research and if you've received grants, you can list that information as well. With past and current as well, if you filed and it's still pending, you can add that as well. You add the grant title, the agency, and the identification number and a description, and of course you can add the total award funding. Patents and technology transfers, you can list all patent applications, pending ones, and filing dates. These are very specific areas for certain individuals, so it may not apply for the majority of the workforce. Research experience, this one is also geared more toward students. So for example, with our medical students, we encourage research. So not necessarily they are the lead researchers, but they can work on a research project, whether it is involving engineering or technology or medicine, health, sometimes epidemiology, but whatever the research is, an experience, they can add that. It doesn't have to be published, it doesn't have to be peer reviewed, but it's part of what you're supposed to put in as a student, as part of your curriculum vitae, and to put on there that you have had research experience. Because with the research experience, you can get published and you can be added as someone as part of the author citation. Publications and presentations are also added separately. So with the research experience, as a student, as a graduate student or undergraduate students are doing research, if you can put your title and your position, research assistant or student researcher, whatever your title was during your research project. Department of the university, the institution, city, country, and dates. You, as a student, you put in who was the name of your advisor. So Dr. John Doe, and their title, associate professor in epidemiology, for example. So you add that information as well. And then you put the study or project title and a brief description of what your role was. Now, if your research led to a publication, you can also add that as part of the published work that of the research that you've done. Like I said, it doesn't have to be published, it doesn't have to be peer reviewed, but you want to show that you have research experience. For publications, provide full citation as listed and underline, bold your name. So Different journals have different ways of citations. So, however the citation is put on there, just you can add that information just as is. The added thing that you need to put on your CV or on your CV is you make sure that you underline and bold your name as part of the citation. So that way, when someone is looking at publication, they see that you've published, and then right away they can go and see your name as part of the publication. Now, you can do research experience, have a research experience, or have done research, as in a lot of cases with medical students in medical schools, and you can, that led to a presentation, oral or a poster. It follows the same guidelines when it comes to the information. So you put the last name, the title, whoever's involved in the presentation, whether it's oral or a poster presentation, your last and your information as well. You underline and bold your name, the name of the conference, the workshop, meeting, location, city, country. Just very similar, very consistent information to add on there. So, here are some tips about when you're writing your curriculum vitae. Make sure that it is short and succinct sentences, that not very long. You do not want the one who's reading your curriculum vitae to get lost in the words and see that it is very cluttered. So make it as short as possible, but with the information that you want to relay to the hiring manager or to the academic institution. Like I said earlier, always begin with active verbs and precise language. Using active verbs catches the attention. Precise language makes your sentences shorter and to the point. Your CV can be as long as it needs to be for you to convey your experiences, qualifications, and skills. When you're working with a template, and this is very important, this is why I wanted to provide you with a template, or if you find a template, make sure that, especially when it comes to a CV, don't reduce the font size. Just keep it as is, because it doesn't matter how long your CV is. What matters is it being organized and uncluttered, clean, and easy to read. Utilize space effectively by using bullet points, section headers, and bolding of information and headers, your name in the citations if you've published in the past, or if you're done oral presentations or poster presentations. I added my information here for a resume or CV formatted template. You can email me at joe.lahoud@ku.ac.ae, and I'll be able to share with you that information. However, we are going to try and find some way to post these two templates, one for resume and one for curriculum vitae, for you to be able to use in the future. Now, moving on beyond the CV, when you're writing it, keep in mind that, especially for resumes and if you're applying for jobs in a corporation, at a corporation, make sure you research the company. Going back to easy to update CV and easy to update resume, come into place when you are applying for a position that you match for the most part the qualifications. However, you may have never been in that certain industry. So it is important for you to research that company, learn about them. Every single company has an about section, a mission, which is very important for you to see if your values match the values of the organization or the company. But also what they're looking for, what type of workforce they have. That information can be valuable for you, so when you're adapting your CV or resume to match the position that you're applying for. Also, it's very important to check the job description. Look for keywords, information that may help you bypass, or not bypass, go forward after the first phase. And the first phase, what most people don't know, is not for someone sitting in an office at Human Resources looking at curriculum vitae. The first phase is a software with certain algorithms that are put in that can scan hundreds of resumes and hundreds of curriculum vitae, looking for information that match the job description. So just to narrow down the list so that way hiring managers don't waste time looking at candidates who do not fit the criteria at all. So when you're applying for a position, make sure that you look at the job description and see what type of keywords they're using. And if you have done work that is similar, if the active verbs that they're using that also match yours, add them to or update your resume with that information, because that way you can fool, kind of in a way, the software program by having the software program recognize and match the criteria and the job description of the position with your description and of your qualifications and the experience that you've had in the past. So that's why it's important to always research the company that you are applying for, so that way you can use that information before you apply to update your resume and then apply. So next, I cannot tell you how many times I've seen CVs for even high-level professionals that have typos and mistakes. Always proofread. To help you with that, there's a great website that I still use and helped me a lot, because sometimes you just miss something and you don't even realize it, and human beings tend to, after reading something for so many times, our eyes skim right over it and you don't see that typo, and you say, I've read it 500 times and I can't believe I missed that typo. So download the app or look it up on the website, or even add it as an extension to Google, where it helps you correct a lot of your sentences. Next, ask someone to look it over, because if you can't spot that typo, somebody else may be able to. So after proofreading it several times and using Grammarly.com to make sure that you didn't make any mistakes, ask someone to read it. Ask, if you're a student, ask a professor for guidance, or go to the career guidance center at your university or your college and talk to them and ask them to look it over, and so they can provide you with any suggestions as to how you can change it. So a CV is, like I said earlier, it's a living document, a permanent work in progress. There will never be a time, unless you may be retiring soon, where you will not update your CV or resume and make changes to it constantly. It's always going to, you're always going to have to change information on there. When I started my career, I used to write in a certain way. I used to add things, information on there that now I look back, it's like, yeah, hiring managers don't care about that information. So as I grew professionally, I started limiting the information that I add to make it very relevant, but also meant that I'm always constantly updating it. The other thing that you need to consider is that, you started working at a company, you added your information, then you started working at another company. You do not want to use the same wording and same sentences and same verbs to describe different positions in different companies. You want to have a variety of sentences and active verbs to describe your role. So revise and update continuously. Now that we finished the session on curriculum vitae, I just would like to point out a couple of other things that help with applying for positions and getting interviews. Always have a cover letter attached or go along with your application. Sometimes you can add objectives. Some people like to add objectives, sometimes they don't. Some don't because they use a cover letter. A cover letter can provide more information about you than just a brief. Most of the time, people use buzzwords that mean nothing as an objective, which is why it's not favorable anymore to add an objective or a summary of qualifications. But if you have that, and you may want to update that information. A suggestion is to write a personal statement about yourself, about who you are, why you went into the field, why you went, and that can help you also if you're applying for a graduate program, or if you are interested in our medical school and you want to apply for medical school, or even applying for college if you're a high school student. Write a one-page personal statement about who you are, and a lot of colleges require that, so it's a good thing that you start working on it and building that personal statement. Once you write a personal statement about who you are as a person, what are you passionate about, what you want to accomplish, why it means to you to go into a certain field, a certain profession. Why, like for example, our medical students, they come in, they're passionate about helping others and saving lives. This is the main reason why they chose to go into medicine. A lot of them, they've had experiences with family members who had suffered certain illnesses, incurable illnesses that drove them to go into medicine. Sometimes they themselves have experienced certain things. So you want to put that information on paper, and that's how you can differentiate yourself from other candidates who are competing for the same position. Or if you're applying for a graduate program or undergraduate program, you can differentiate yourself from those who are applying for the same spot. Then the next step, once you have that personal statement, it becomes much easier to have an objective, to have a summary of qualifications, or to be able to incorporate that information into a cover letter. So that way you can tell the hiring manager just briefly, it doesn't have to be a long page. A cover letter should be very short about why you're interested in the position. Say what the position is, of course, list some of the qualifications that will make you a good candidate for the position, and talk a little bit about yourself based on your personal statement. So once you start, even before you work on a CV, work on a personal statement, so that way that can be the background of how you build your CV, to make sure that what you're putting on there is very descriptive of who you are as a person, and that way you can, once you get that interview, you can walk in with confidence that the hiring manager will see that through your the information that you provided, and then when you walk in and they meet you in person and get to know you and see if you are someone who they would like to hire or not. Thank you very much for taking the time to go through this session. If you have any questions, I'm sure that we can answer. I believe we have a few more minutes to answer any questions that you may have. So I'll leave it up for, let's find out. Okay, so the first question is adding your nationality important? Forgive me for going back and forth with that, just because I want to give you a comparison of things that take part in an interview or a job application. So my understanding is here in UAE, it's something that is common to add your nationality on there. My guess is you probably can add it, especially that there are certain positions that are for UAE nationals only, or for expats, or whatever the reason, sometimes companies specifically state that information. Now, I would take a guess and say if the company's job description doesn't say specifically the nationality of the person, I don't see why would you add that. Just because, again, we go back to, the photo, adding a photo of yourself on the resume. You don't want to invite other people's biases into the job application. So sometimes people may not like someone from a certain nationality just for whatever reason. We won't go into the details regarding that, but you may not want to invite that. So my suggestion is look at the job description and before you apply, if it is a requirement, then you can add it. If not, I don't see why a good reason for you to add that information. I mean, especially here in UAE. If you're here in UAE, you most likely have a work visa or a visa that you allows you to work. So your nationality should carry no weight as to whether a hiring manager should hire you or not. It is always based on your qualifications and the values that you will bring to the table. Another comment / question is that regarding photo, some companies ask for a photo, so it is common here in UAE to add a photo. Again, check the job description before you apply, and you can adjust it accordingly. Yes, you're absolutely right. It is common here. I wasn't aware that certain companies require photos on the CVs. So if the company requires that, and you're interested in working for a company like that, or in that field, then go ahead and add it. Basically, you just look at the position and the job that you're applying for, that you're interested in, and update your information, update your resume, update your CV, update your cover letter based on what they're asking for. Because if you're interested in the position, you want to do everything you can to be competitive and get that job interview so you can go there and showcase your experience and the knowledge that you have acquired and how you can benefit the company if they hire you. So the next question is, should we add our volunteering work if I'm a fresh graduate, and why do you think that making up things to fill your CV isn't a good idea? So because, okay, let's start with the first part. The curriculum vitae is a description of who you are as a person, and volunteer work is part of your life, part of you, part of who you are. And especially if you are a student who does volunteer work through university, then you can add that. You can always add that. You can have that as long as you are part of an organization, as long as you're doing volunteer work. Add that to your CV, add that to your resume, because that is an important part of who you are. And additionally, like, for example, if you are a member of an international NGO, if you support an NGO and the hiring manager is also part of that NGO, then that's, you walk into the conversation or to the interview, and as part of the conversation, you can talk about that guess what? If the other 10 candidates did not do volunteer work or were not part of that NGO, now you have a competitive advantage against those other candidates, because now you are bonding with the hiring manager. You're getting to know the hiring manager, as well as the hiring manager getting to know you. So that's why it's important and it's relevant information to add volunteer work on there. The next one is fill your CV or making up things to fill your CV. When I said making up things, it's not like making up things like if you assisted in a certain project but briefly, but it was important to you not to add it. But you can add that. You can add information. Now, if you just recently graduated and you most likely are applying for positions for recent graduates or entry-level positions. So the hiring managers know that already. And first, if you put too much information and too much made-up information, so let's say you're 22 years old, you just graduated from university, you applied for a job, but you're listing experiences that someone is, 27, 28, the hiring manager can tell that. So that can have a negative impact on your application. So what I meant with making things up, like things that you've never done, that you don't have experience in. So let's take, for example, I'll give you an example, personal experience. So when I was working on my master's degree, part of my, one of my courses was a marketing research course. So I learned about SPSS and I worked with SPSS, and, but it was just for that course. Now, for a couple of years, after I graduated, and I added that as part of my skills on there. I still knew how to work it, but I wasn't really that knowledgeable about SPSS. So after a couple of years, I dropped it because it was relevant right around when I took that course and when I worked on that on SPSS, and a few years later when I needed it for certain things that I worked on. But my work environment offered different softwares that were much easier and much more related to the work that I was doing. So I even though I wasn't considered someone who is really knowledgeable with SPSS, I added it because I had that experience. So now, if I had never worked in SPSS, and I know that the company is asking asking for people with qualifications that have worked for 5 years on the software, and I added that, that's lying. That's making things up that you don't. And they will eventually know that you have no experience or no knowledge of that software. So you just have to be very careful of how you add things. Another example I give, so I've learned French in my younger years. I spoke barely. I can read it and understand it relatively, but a few years ago I just dropped it because one time in an interview I met with someone who spoke French, and I started stumbling because I understood what he was saying, but I hadn't practiced it in so long that I felt like I just didn't know how to respond. And after that interview, I went back and I just removed it because it's just no longer relevant. I no longer have that knowledge, that skill. So you always have to constantly update that information. And mind you, I did not get that job. So it impacted me very negatively. I really wanted that position, but I made a mistake. So it's important to put valuable information, relevant information, but also correct information. So that way, when you're asked, you know your stuff. You know what you're talking about. Okay, do you need to include professional or personal references, or do you send those if and when needed? Yes, I missed that option, that note at the end. More recently, unless the company asks you to include that in your application, you can put it as you provide it as if they request it. The reason why is, especially if you are applying for high-level positions, you don't want you want to wait until the end once you are a finalist in the search process. So if you and 2 other candidates are the finalists for a position, then if a company is doing it correctly, if the human resources department is doing it correctly, they would wait until the end to reach out to your references, just so they can, as one of the things that they do in order to differentiate and see who has better references than the other 2 candidates. If there are a lot of candidates who applied, they're not going to reach out to all of your references, but you also don't want to provide, if you're actively looking for a job, and excuse me, and your references are very busy individuals, and you apply for a position that you weren't very sure about, or you applied for a position that you know that you're not going to get, and then the hiring manager called your references. Now you wasted their time for something that you're really not going to get, or you're not going to get that position. So you have to be mindful of providing your reference information and personal contact information of those people who you entrusted in providing feedback about you, because you want them to, if a hiring manager, if 2 or 3 hiring managers call them, then they will take their time to provide feedback and provide information about you. But if they're bombarded with phone calls every day or emails, then they're not going to give as much feedback as you'd like them to. In academics, you can references or letters of recommendations can be done. Also, in some in universities, they request to have recent letters of recommendation. So that's another thing where you can, and has to come directly from the person who's recommending you. So that's also, you need to change the dates. You need to ask your the person who's providing the recommendation to update the date, so that way it'll be closer to the time frame that they're asking for. So the bottom line is, just check again the job application and see if it's a requirement or not. Most likely, if it's a requirement, the company is not going to waste their time calling references of 100 candidates. They'll only call references once they narrow it down to 2, maybe 3 to 5 candidates. Are there any organizations, institutions, or societies that issue formal guidelines or templates regarding CVs, formats? So not really. So Curriculum Vitae, it follows a similar structure, a similar format, like the one that I showed you earlier as a screenshot. So that's basically the format. Now with the resumes, like I said, it changes with the times and the new trends of resumes. So it is a good idea to, if you're looking into moving into a new company or a different position, it's a good idea to research what new trends are out there for resumes. But basically, it has to be clean, easy to read. That's the criteria. It can be anything you like these days. It's colorful. It has different things on there. Personally, I've seen a lot of new resumes that look too cluttered, and for someone who can't really focus, it can be a disaster for those who are using that resume to apply for certain positions, because you're just not going to get a call back because your resume is just, there's too much going on there. So keep it simple, in a nice format, and always ask someone else to give feedback, especially someone who works in career guidance at your university. And I'm sure that many universities, if you're an alumnus or alumna of of your college, you can reach out to your career center, career services center at your university, because that service, they not only provide that service for students, they also provide these services for alumni. So to answer your question, no, there is no formal guidelines when it comes to that. The only guidelines that you need to follow is consistency of how you document all of that information on there. So if you're having the information on the left-hand side and the years on the right-hand side, keep it consistent all the way through. The only thing, the guidelines that you have to follow is when it comes to publication, you do the citation based on the way it was published. So that's the only thing that you have to follow strictly when it comes to adding your information. As a fresh graduate, how to make my CV appealing without work experience. So that's one of the things that you have to look at the content of that I provided earlier. One thing, like the example I gave, is volunteer work. You can add that on there. If there are several organizations here, especially here in UAE, and especially now during the COVID situation, that offer volunteer services for individuals to do it remotely. For example, there's an organization called MAN, M-A apostrophe A-N. They provide services. I believe it's part of the government. They provide services for the community, for the elderly, and I recommended it to some of our medical students who had their break recently, and to contact the organization and do some volunteer work, even if it's 1 hour or 2 hours. And basically what they did was, you reached out to senior citizens, check on them, talk to them. There are different ways that you can put in your information in order to apply for volunteer work. So you can make phone calls, or you can do help with delivering certain things. If you're in the health field, you can provide health information and to help individuals, especially now with the COVID-19 situation, pandemic, where you need to provide a lot of health information for individuals, especially those. And for the volunteer work through this organization, you don't have to speak Arabic. Some of them are also for English. Some are strictly for Arabic speakers. So that's one way you can add that. You can beef up your resume and show that. And that was one of the things that I talked to our medical students about, is that medical students, if I can give you just a reference, is during their second year, especially in the US, they go on mission trips. So the first year they do a lot of the classroom work, and second year as well. But during their summer break, which is about 6 weeks, that's the only 6-week period that they will get in their entire 4-year medical journey. They make sure that they either do research or they go on health mission trips. So a lot of our medical students in the US used to go to Haiti, especially after the earthquake. They go to Latin America to do mission trips for several weeks. They go there. They help doctors work in the community, in the poor community and rural areas. But because of the pandemic, no medical students in the US and Canada, nor here at Khalifa University, were able to do any of that type of volunteer work because of the pandemic. So we were trying to figure out ways to help them out, with adding information that they didn't spend their summer break just sitting down doing nothing. So if you graduated recently and you haven't found work, fill up your time with volunteer work. Try to help be part of your community, give back to your community. Show that, if there's a gap between graduation and that the day that they call you for an interview, the hiring manager is going to ask, so what have you been doing for the past 6 months? Then you can say, oh, I've been looking for jobs. I graduated recently, but I've been involved with this organization. Or if you graduated at your college and you have your bachelor's degree, you can go back and talk to your previous professors and maybe volunteer to mentor students. That can be also an option as well that you can add as part of your volunteer work. Another thing that you can add, and I still have one more question, but I just remembered one thing that you can do. If you graduated, try to look up, and I'm not sure if, depending on your university, there are services through LinkedIn that are part of university. For example, our university here at Khalifa University provides access to professional development and learning courses on LinkedIn. Some of them you can get a certificate, some of them you can just learn. That's something that if it helps you professionally, you can sign up for some of these courses. Some of them are free, some of them you have to pay. As part of that, you can add that information on your resume to show that you've been doing things, you just not haven't, you graduated and stopped learning or stopped doing anything. Learning for, going through a 4 to 6 weeks program where you can get a certificate in kind of your field, or if eventually you're interested in managing people or going into leadership positions, there are a lot of courses on there where you take leadership courses or if part of your work can be graphic design, but you don't do graphic design, or you want an advanced course in graphic design, you can sign up for courses like that. So that's another way that you can add information to your resume without having to make things up. Last question. Oh, I believe that was the last question. Thank you again for attending. I hope you gained valuable information. And if you are a high school student, this is the first time that you've ever done a CV or a resume, just make sure that you go through the things that we've discussed earlier. If you are an undergraduate student as well, try to look for programs at your university or at your college where you can help out, where you can volunteer, where you can do extra things that now as a student, if you're not working while going to school, now is the time, now that have some time to actually build a full page resume that once you graduate, you can be able to showcase who you are as a person and promote yourself and get the work and the job that you are seeking. Thank you again, and have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.